Varmt välkomna till Healthcare Direkt. Idag har vi en gäst med oss i studion som ni kan se. Dan Akschuti, han är analyst på Pareto Securities och vi ska prata om 3 stycken köprekommendationer och han är från Schweiz så vi kommer att ta den här intervjun på engelska. Hi Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome here.
So you're going to speak about 3 different companies and I'd like to ask you, first question is what makes Xbrane worth an investment?
So we initiated just recently on Xbrane Biopharma, so they are developing biosimilars. So it is.
I'm going to stop you there. Could you just briefly explain what is a biosimilar?
Biosimilars are drugs that are kind of, they are not exact copies, but they have the same efficacy as an originator drug, so an original drug that is on the market. And they are trying to copy it in a way that the efficacy is the same, and then they can go on the market with that as soon as the patent runs out of the originator drug. And then they can come at a significantly lower cost than what the originators costs. And in Xbrane's lead drug, this is a massive difference. So currently in the US, for instance, this originator drug Lucentis is sold for around $2,000. And Xbrane can go down to, let's say, around $600 and theoretically even further down. So let's go back to my first question. What makes Xbrane worth an investment? So it is a very de-risked kind of biotech company, let's say, because if you look at the biosimilars at this stage where Xbrane's lead asset currently is, 36 out of 38 got approved. So that's a 95% success chance, which is abnormal for other like biotech companies where they're trying to bring new drugs to the market. So from that side, it is a low risk, let's say, biotech.
But compared, you say it's not as hard to make a new drug, of course, but also compared to regular generics, then it's in the middle, you could say, not as easy as a regular generic.
Yeah, it is much more difficult. So biological drugs are produced through like genetically modified yeasts or bacteria. So there is a lot of difficulties in these like drug substance manufacturing in these bioreactors that they use, and that's a big difference to chemically manufactured drugs. So it is a lot of the issues that biosimilars have are in that space, like manufacturing and getting the right quality, etc. But else there is a little risk, and also Xbrane has established a very good partnerships in the US for North America with Bausch & Lomb, it's a Canadian company. And in Europe with Stada, a very big generics company.
Would that be necessary, you say, because Xbrane is of course small, so it would be easier to have someone bigger company?
Yeah, so absolutely. And for instance, Bausch & Lomb, they are currently selling Lucentis, so the originator drug of Xlucane, the drug that the biosimilar that Xbrane is developing. So they will just change it on their shelf, so to speak. So it's not a shelf drug. But
what is Xlucane for?
So it's for eye disease, wet age-related macular degeneration. So this disease is kind of characterized by increasing loss of center vision. So you have first a blurred center vision that becomes black, and then it goes out. So it's a very bad eye disease, and
that comes with age.
Yeah, it's one of the main factors is age.
Could we just go back to the chances or the probability of that we will have a launch?
So that we have a launch, I would say it's very high. So as mentioned, I expect 95% success chance for the phase 3 with potential issues in like manufacturing or so. But in our due diligence in the company, I think we are very confident that they will be able to deliver on that. And then approval again at the same kind of 95%. So, and then commercially through the partners, I would say the launch is kind of also secured. So that's why we, in our base case and conservative approach, we put the 81% overall success chance to really reach commercial success. But
that's like really high if you compare to like regular pharma research.
Yes.
And let us take us through the important milestones toward the approval. What do we know about the time-wise?
So we expect now in Q4 a full enrollment of their phase 3 study, where they are trying to show that their drug performs as the originator drug, Lucentis. This should come in Q4, and that should be quite a trigger, because it means that the study is fully enrolled. And 6 months after that, they will be able to take an interim readout, and that's where we should get top-line data of the phase 3 trial. And that data is already enough then for the company to submit at the FDA in the US for approval, and EMA in Europe for approval.
What about competitors? Because the original drug will, of course, be still a competitor, but do we have more?
Yeah, so for the originators, so we already assume, for instance, in the US, a price drop of 40%, or the rebates that are also currently given. And in Europe, 30%, so we already assume much lower prices than what is listed. And then the competitors, so there is Samsung Bioepis with Biogen that will be on the market before Xbrane. And then there is Formycon with 2 other partners that is having now exactly these manufacturing-related issues, so they are facing some delays. But it's unclear exactly when they will be on the market, because they're also not sharing all the information. But we incorporated this into our estimates, actually, and gave quite a lot of market share to the competitors, but still ended up with a very attractive upside to Xbrane.
So in regular pharma, you have like this first mover advance, like first to the market. How big would you say that would be for biosimilars?
I think that is also a case there, but then you also have to look at the partners. So I think just the fact that Bausch + Lomb is there, that is currently having a lot of ophthalmology channels in the US, and is selling Lucentis, they can just replace that with Xlucane. And Stada as well, so I think there are quite a lot of commercial muscles already engaged with Xbrane.
Should we move on to the second company?
Yeah, I just want to end up with what we saw today with Xbrane Pharma. They had preliminary results, and the share was up 16%, what I could see. And when you're thinking about the Xbrane compared as an investment compared to Xbrane, what do you think if you compare them?
I think they are actually both attractive, and Xbrane we saw a bit, I think a month or 2 ago, the share dropped because they had a small issue of their drug kind of being almost too good, because it's supposed to be a generic, but because their chemical form is better absorbed, so they had some issues that are actually good for the patients in a sense, but everything is resolvable. And
yeah, that sounds like a pretty good issue if the drug is too good.
Yeah, kind of.
But it's still an issue, maybe?
Yeah, it creates some problems with the regulatory authorities, but solvable problems, and they're solving it, and now the data today looked very good, so that's why we see kind of a rebound now.
And in the biosimilar, before we change topic, the litigation risk, how would you say that would be in the case here? Is it something you have to have in mind?
I think that is extremely low for Xbrane with Lucentis. Then there are then these details. You have different versions how the drug is either in a pre-filled syringe or in a vial. And for the pre-filled syringe, for instance, Regeneron is being attacked by Novartis in the US for their pre-filled syringe. But Xbrane is developing a different type, also different material, not the glass one, for instance. And that's, I think, where also that is de-risked, and we don't see there a big risk in terms of IP.
And also, Xbrane Pharma is not a one-trick pony. They have other projects after Xlucane.
Yes, so they have quite a pipeline of biosimilars. They are still preclinical. We currently didn't assign any value in our valuation there, else the the evaluation would be too high.
But still, we could see we have a graphic of this actually for all your recommendations today. We could see your target price there. So as you say, you have the target price of 157 on Xbrane, and still you say there are some room for more potential.
So I think Xbrane, as many other Swedish biotechs, they are just traded more or less the same no matter what they have. Some are marketing themselves better and then they get high evaluations. But for Xbrane, I think the fair value is actually 268 SEK right now. But then we look a bit at the peers and we look at what is realistically at least feasible within a year. So the bottom and that I think was 157. But yeah, there's a lot of room when the other projects
but it's a big potential if we take up the stock price and we have the graph there. You could see 157 is a lot over what we trade today.
Yes.
So interesting investment, and we will see on this later. It's very interesting to follow. I would say.
Time to move on to the second company.
I would say so.
It's Vicore Pharma. What do they do?
So Vicore Pharma is engaged in fibrotic lung diseases, so lung diseases where there is increasing amount of scar tissue in the lungs. And so they have 3 indications they're going after. One that is now very current topic is COVID-19, and we saw that there are lots of companies trying to do COVID-19 studies with drugs where it makes little sense or
the competition in that field now seems like almost murdering. Is like so many, every research company want to have their own COVID-19 trial.
Yeah, so they're trying all kinds of drugs and some make very little sense, some make a bit of sense.
But do they make a drug then to treat? It's not a vaccine they're doing?
Yes, so it's a treatment.
It's a treatment.
Against the inflammation. So it's actually, the drug is not doing anything against the virus, but against the inflammation, which is
the symptoms.
Main cause of mortality in COVID-19 patients. And it makes really a lot of sense because the drug is, the virus uses an enzyme to enter the cells, and by that this enzyme cannot do its functions, and this is a main driver of the inflammation. And Vicore's drug is basically a product of that enzyme. So it really makes a lot of sense that this should do something against the inflammation.
So Vicore Pharma's COVID-19 study makes more sense than others, you would say, or?
Yes, it's one of the ones where I believe that it will really work against inflammation. And what is also good to see is that many companies, they fail to enroll patients in their COVID-19 studies. And Vicore, I expect them to announce full enrollment next month because they got a lot of patients in from India, which helped them to fill up the study. And so I think they can really perform even in difficult circumstances.
But that's not their main focus, the COVID. It's another product, right?
No, it's another project. But I would go into what happened roughly a week ago when we had like this press release about one patient that had interesting effect. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that was very good news for the company. So they could get a lung from an IPF patient that got a lung transplant. And they saw in this lung that the target of the drug from Vicore is expressed there. And when they gave the drug, it binds, and they could see the antifibrotic effect on a key factor that you can see on the marketed drugs, that this is kind of the key factor in IPF, TGF-beta. So there are lots of other things, but just having this readout, I think, in a real lung, a real IPF lung is a very encouraging. And we also expect the first patient dose now in IPF next month.
But the fact it's only just one patient or the lung from one patient, how much worth would that be for the stock price to increase, you would say?
I think for the stock price it's hard to tell how people are valuing this, but I think it really confirms what we saw and what we put also in our initiation on Vicore. It's a lot of preclinical data, but also some indirect clinical data from other trials that really show that this drug works, and this is just another very good puzzle piece that is adding to that.
And when you talk about probabilities to reach the market for them, they have their candidate VP01. How much probability do you put in your analysis?
So I think this is probably now worth to be adjusted because of what we saw. But maybe if we go away from just percentages, if we just look at the rationale, it just makes a lot of like they had better data, or at least as good data in the preclinical models that also like the drugs of Boehringer Ingelheim and Roche that are on the market use. And so it just looks from all what we can see that it just works. We never know how strongly it will work. So is it a cure? Probably very unlikely. Yeah. But maybe it has a very strong effect on disease progression and will change the treatment course.
Because when we're talking about idiopathic diseases, then we're talking about diseases where we don't really know the cause.
Yeah. So is that an idiopathic disease? Is that where you don't know the cause?
Yeah.
Of the disease?
So we don't know exactly the cause. I mean, there are some things that are increasing the prevalence, like exposure to metal dust, for instance, is correlating with IPF and other dust forms.
I just learned something new there. Idiopathic diseases.
And then let's go into the valuation. And you have a target price of 51 kronor here.
Yeah.
What could you say about that and the potential for the share?
So that target price is also risk adjusted, of course, and it doesn't include at all the COVID-19 study. So we kind of kept this as a bonus. And because the whole situation is still a bit unclear how it...
So that was not included in the price?
No. Okay. So COVID-19 is kind of a bonus scenario. And we will include it once the data is out, which is expected, I would say, around November, latest December. Maybe end of October, but that's a bit tight. But yeah, so...
And for the important milestones, what would you look out after in Vicore Pharma?
So now next month I expect 2 press releases. So press release of first patient dosed in IPF, so that will be a very good milestone. And then the full enrollment of the COVID-19 study. And maybe we get some timeline on when we can get the data. And then the data probably around November, December. And then also data from the systemic sclerosis trial, where they're looking at Raynaud's phenomena. That's where you kind of lose blood flow in the hands, and that's something they're looking.
As a side effect of.
Many people have that to a slight extent, and these patients have it much more extremely. And it's kind of a first thing the company looks at to see how the drug works, and we are quite optimistic for a positive readout there.
And lastly, we have Bioinvent, and I think they're in the cancer treatment field. Am I right, Magnus?
Yeah, but you could explain more. Immunotherapies, and they're moving into these non-solid cancer forms. Could you explain more?
So Bioinvent has been around for a long time, as you know, and I think now it's important to kind of cut the history and look at where they are now and what they can do now. And so they have a very big oncology pipeline. I think it's one of the biggest in Swedish biotech for oncology. And so the lead drug showed earlier this spring a very good effects on kind of hopeless patients, very strong effects against the cancers they have. And we will get some more data from that before the end of this year. Follow-up from these patients. It will be really interesting to see if they remain free of the cancer, and the ones that had the complete response, and also how the new patients are doing that they took into this trial. Then there will be another readout with Merck's Keytruda, where they're combining their lead drug with, and that is then.
And that's one of the big names in the immunotherapy, which
yes, so Keytruda, I think, sold for $11 billion in 2019. So it's
yeah,
big numbers.
So it's a good drug to get attached to, maybe.
Yeah, so it's a very, very efficacious drug, but of course it still doesn't help all patients, and you still need to combine it with other things, and And Bioinvent's rationale there makes a lot of sense, not just with that, as they do with Roche's rituximab. That's the data we already saw.
Yeah, and also you talked about cutting the past. I want to bring in a stock graph here just to see, because they've been on for the stock market for a long time, as we can see, and they have been struggled for some years, as you can see in the graph here. So why would it be would it be a change up now?
Yeah, so I think, as I said before, like I think it's important to look at their current pipeline. Very, very good drugs, very good science, and I think that was probably also an issue in the past. So it should have probably not been listed, because it was a bit like operating like a university, very research focused, which produced now these very good drugs, and now they are shifting more to a company that makes sense to be listed, and they got in money from really good investors as well earlier this year, which also kind of reinforces our belief that this is and this money helps them to run the clinical trials faster, which also was a bit an issue before, that they couldn't enroll, and this is always an issue for small companies compared to big pharma.
And this is interesting, because you get in a big chunk of money now, and it's easy, as you say, when you have so many opportunities, like in this company. Would you say, are they focused enough?
Yeah, they're absolutely focused. So it looks like a lot of opportunities, but it's still one big field, let's say, and they're very, very smart when you talk to these to their executives. So they really know what they're doing, and also they have very exciting projects upcoming. For instance, the one with transgene, where they are combining oncolytic virus, where we know that it works with a kind of checkpoint inhibitor, CTLA-4, and then add another thing in there, a cytokine, and it's very
you see great potential there.
Yeah.
And the target price is, we should say, 3 kronor, and what is valued in there?
So there is currently not too much value. This target price is still a bit old, I would say. So we are now looking for the data this year to just see that they can really keep up with the news flow of clinical data, that they can really show that they can perform clinically, and then of course how the data looks. And based on that, I think we will come out with also update and new target price.
We were also going to ask him about the Congress, right?
Yeah, the ESMO Congress that passed some time ago now. And on this Congress, how much could you follow it, and what was your main takeaways from there?
Main takeaways, if we just speak generally, we see in general we see this trend to continue, that cancer treatments are more and more combined, and cancers are more and more like differentiated. So there are so many more like subtypes of cancers than we usually think of, and that these are kind of much more targeted than in the past. So different mutations are always a focus, and are increasing focus. And then also some on the checkpoint inhibitor side, where you would think not much is still possible. So there was some interesting data from Regeneron and Sanofi on a checkpoint inhibitor. And
what's a checkpoint inhibitor? I don't know if you have time to go through
it.
That's
immunotherapy.
Oh, okay, that's immunotherapy.
One of the big class. Could you add?
Yes, so that's immunotherapy, and it prevents, let's say, cancer growth.
Okay, right.
It's one of the big class, you could say, and then it's the CTLA-4, right?
Yes, so they're all checkpoint inhibitors.
Yeah, but I mean the different classes.
They do different things, but yeah, they're in the same class. Let's
maybe
say
I just made it even more complicated now, because you two can. Maybe you can continue the discussion after.
Yeah, the data was from a PD-1 inhibitor, and they showed that in non-small cell lung cancers type, I mean, again, subgroups of patients, they saw a reduced 43% risk reduction in death from cancer. So that I think was quite encouraging and a bit surprising to see such data.
Would you say the results you have seen and the studies you've seen in the ESMO study give support for precision medicine? Then you're differentiated and.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think as I mentioned, in general, we can really see that it's more and more focus on individual mutations, and for instance, there was a bit of a hype on KRAS. Again, KRAS, there are different subtypes again, and there was quite a hype on that, and now we can see that this alone is not sufficient. So there was initial response from Amgen's drug, from Mirati as well, but now we can also there see as good as it looked, you still need to add something more. So it's just it becomes more and more complex, because that's what cancer is. It is complex. Yeah.
When we're talking about precision medicine, I want to add in, you have companies making this companion diagnostics as well. Did you see any of that on the Congress, and how is important would you say it would be to have your own companion diagnostic when you're in the precision medicine?
I think that is extremely important. So that is kind of hand in hand with the drugs now. So you really need to see exactly what is driving the specific cancer of that specific patient, and only then, and for that you need the diagnostics, and only then you can actually tailor the treatment. And there are still a lot of targets that are currently not treated, but at least we know more and more, and then we can have these cocktails in the end.
I think we've actually hit the 30-minute mark, haven't we?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we have to wrap up the program. Did you have anything that you wanted to say? You mentioned to me something in the beginning about some...
Yeah, you may be thinking of Kontigo Cares.
Yes.
Really brief.
Yes.
They have a distribution agreement in Finland now, and I could see about a week ago the share price went up, and yeah, that's interesting for that company.
I think that's gonna that's the end of the show, so we're just gonna say thanks for watching, and jag kan ta det på svenska. Glöm inte att klicka tumme upp, så ses vi igen nästa torsdag. Ha det fint!